Good morning, DCO 30 students. This is Katie Birch, your cooperative education teacher. We are jumping right in today to topic number 6 in our course. So we are learning about employment standards and human rights. I really love this topic actually because we take the time to learn what your rights are so you're not taken advantage of when you're working in the workplace. So today we're going to go over your rights. We're going to look at the Employment Standards Act. We're also going to watch a video to overview the Employment Standards Act, talk about the main things it talks about, and then we're going to do a scavenger hunt together once we talk about all your rights as an employee. So starting from the top, and you can find all the things you need in Google Classroom. So if you go to classwork, we're moving on to topic 6, human rights. And you can open, we're going to start today with employment standards. And then next class tomorrow, we're going to talk about human rights, which is another really awesome topic that I'm interested in. And I know that you'll enjoy. All right. So what should you know in co-op about employment standards and human rights? So in topic 4, you learned about the regulations and workplace safety. You made a poster. Maybe you thought that was the end of laws and regulations. Well, guess what? It's not, unfortunately. It's just the beginning. So even though it seems that regulations are boring, they're actually necessary for you in order to have a safe and successful work experience. I know in this article it says co-op experience, but many of you are already in jobs. And knowing your rights and the regulations to protect you from danger and make your workplace fair and equitable is a really important aspect of being an employee. We're going to look at a scenario here. Okay, this is a conversation between Khalil and Edie. So Khalil says, "Must be nice to have that much energy. I'm exhausted." Edie, "What happened?" Khalil says, 3 very long 9-hour days at my work without a break is what happened." "You need to check that out. I don't think that's legal." "Okay, maybe you're right. I'll check it out after I sleep." So, in this topic, for this section, you're going to learn that situations like Khalil's and whether or not they're actually legal. And you're going to learn about what your rights are. You'll also learn how to protect your rights at work. Just as it's against the law to allow unsafe working for workplace hazards, it's also illegal to provide a working atmosphere where discrimination and prejudice are the boss. And you do have rights, and there are things that you can do to protect yourself. So, we're going to first give you the knowledge, and then you'll be able to avoid most of these problems and enjoy your job a lot more. So, do you think Khalil is entitled to a break? And if so, how many hours? Take a minute to think about that. Khalil worked 3 9-hour shifts and he didn't get a break. How many breaks do you think Khalil is entitled to according to the Ontario regulations? How many hours do you think a full time employee should work in an average week? And what do you think overtime is? Also, as an employee, should you assume that all bosses uphold your rights in the workplace? So I just want to take a minute or two to think about that. And maybe what I'll do is I'll post these questions and you can answer them in the classroom. But we're going to have a chance to see if your ideas were correct. So think about how you would answer those questions. Is Khalil entitled to a break? If he is, how many hours before he gets a break? How many hours do you think a full time employee should work in an average week? What do you think overtime is? And do you assume that all bosses will uphold your rights in the workplace? Okay. So the first thing we're going to look at is the Employment Standards Act. Okay. And it's a set of laws in Ontario that determine the minimum standards for working conditions. There's similar laws all across Canada, but Ontario has their own Employment Standards Act. And it addresses issues like minimum wage, overtime pay, who gets it, when, talks about payroll deductions, including taxes, breaks, vacation pay, holidays, union, all these things. Okay. The Employment Standard Act also specifies whether you're eligible for any termination pay. And termination pay is given to a worker whose employment is being ended if an employer chooses not to give the notice. Okay. So before we get started, you can stop listening to me for a minute, and we're actually going to listen to a 2-minute video on what is the Employment Standard Act. It's just a very brief video, and it will give you an idea of what we're talking about. So let's go jump back to Google Classroom, and I'll put that video on for you, just to get you thinking. And you can go and watch this video again if you'd like to get more information, because there's going to be a quiz at the end of this. Where are we? There we go.
Hi, I'm Camille Sandana, an Employment Standards Officer with the Ministry of Labour. Most employees in Ontario are protected by the Employment Standards Act, or ESA. It sets out minimum standards for workplaces. Over the next few minutes, I'll give you some helpful information about your rights under the ESA. You'll learn how it may apply to you and also where to find additional resources. You may have greater rights under other legislation or the common law. To help ensure that employers understand their obligations and employees know their rights, the Ministry has prepared the Employment Standards Poster, which briefly describes some of the employment standards in Ontario. The poster is available for free online in English and many other languages. To learn more about the poster requirements or to download the poster, visit ontario.ca/ESA poster. To see if they apply to you, try the guide to special rules and exemptions available on our website.
Okay, so we're going to go and take a look at the human rights under the Employment Standards Act in Ontario.
Hi, I'm Camille Sandana, an Employment Standards Officer with the Ministry of Labour. Most employees in Ontario are protected by the Employment Standards Act, or ESA. It sets out minimum standards for workplaces. Over the next few minutes, I'll give you some helpful information about your rights under the ESA. You'll learn how it may apply to you and also where to find additional resources. You may have greater rights under other legislation or the common law. To help ensure that employers understand their obligations and employees know their rights, the Ministry has prepared the Employment Standards Poster, which briefly describes some of the employment standards in Ontario. The poster is available for free online in English and many other languages. To learn more about the poster requirements or to download the poster, visit ontario.ca/ESA poster. To see if they apply to you, the boss is making me available on our website. The boss is making me work 10 hours again today. Can she just do that whenever she wants?
I don't know. She does that to me all the time, too.
In Ontario, there are daily and weekly limits to how long you can be asked to work. For most jobs, the daily limit is 8 hours, or the number of hours in an established regular workday if it's longer than 8 hours. The daily maximum can only be exceeded if you agree in writing, including electronically. The weekly limit for most jobs is 48 hours, but you can work more if certain conditions are met. Your employer needs to receive your written agreement. They must supply you with information about your rights before you sign. And for most jobs, after 44 hours of work in a work week, you must receive overtime pay. The overtime rate must be at least 1.5 times your regular rate of pay. Eating periods are also regulated by the ESA. Most employees must not work more than 5 consecutive hours without a 30-minute unpaid eating period. You can learn more about overtime, eating periods, and the daily and weekly limits at ontario.ca/hours of work.
Well, you got the job, but times are tough, so I can only give you $10 an hour.
That's not even minimum wage.
Most employees are entitled to be paid at least the general minimum wage. However, there are different minimum wage rates for students, liquor servers, home workers, and hunting and fishing guides. For current rates, visit ontario.ca/minimum wage.
So I haven't been paid in 3 weeks. My rent is coming up due. When am I going to get paid next?
Employers must establish a regular pay period and pay employees on a regular payday. An employer can pay wages by cash, check, or direct deposit into your bank account. You must also be provided with a pay stub or wage statement on or before the established payday. The pay stub lists both the wages and any deductions made in the pay period. Only certain kind of deductions are allowed to be taken from your wages. You can watch the Ministry of Labor's video, Illegal Deductions from Wages, on the Government of Ontario's YouTube channel to find out more.
Hey Karen, how are you?
Hi, Camille. How long do you have to work here to get a vacation?
I think it's about a year.
Generally, after completing each 12-month period of work, employees with less than 5 years of employment are entitled to 2 weeks of vacation time, and employees with 5 or more years of employment are entitled to 3 weeks. In most cases, employees with less than 5 years of employment are also entitled to receive vacation pay, which is at least 4% of gross wages earned in the vacation entitlement year, while employees with 5 or more years are entitled to receive vacation pay, which is at least 6% of gross wages earned in the vacation entitlement year. The vacation pay earned must be paid to an employee in a lump sum before they take vacation time. But if you and your employer agree, electronically or in writing, vacation pay can be paid on each paycheck or at any other time. To learn more about vacation time and pay, read the vacation chapter in your guide to the Employment Standards Act, available at ontario.ca/vacation.
Working this holiday, it's so busy today.
At least we get paid extra.
Yeah.
There are 9 public holidays in Ontario every year. Most employees are entitled to take these days off. Some employees work in industries where they may have to work on a public holiday. If you're asked to work on a public holiday, you may be entitled to either your regular pay plus a different day off with public holiday pay, or public holiday pay plus premium pay, which is at least 1.5 times your regular rate for each hour worked on the holiday. To learn more about public holidays, read the public holiday chapter in your guide to the Employment Standards Act, available at ontario.ca/public holidays.
I've only worked here for 6 months. Do you know if I can take a leave? I don't know. That's a really good question.
If you're protected by the ESA, you have the right to take unpaid time off as a leave of absence for certain reasons. It doesn't matter if you're a full-time, part-time, permanent, or term contract employee. There are a number of different leaves you may be entitled to, such as pregnancy, parental, family responsibility, bereavement, family caregiver, family medical, or sick leave. Your employer can't punish or terminate you for taking a protected leave, and in most cases, they must return you to your job when your leave is over. Information on all the different leaves of absence is available in your guide to the Employment Standards Act.
Hello, you asked to see me?
Hi, Minda. Thank you for coming. You're a good employee and have been for the last 4 years. Unfortunately, the business is no longer profitable. I'm going to have to let you go. Sadly, 4 weeks from today will be your last day. Here's your written notice.
In most cases, if you're terminated, your employer must give either notice of termination, termination pay, or a combination of both. The amount you may be entitled to depends on how long you worked for your employer. You're only eligible if you've been employed continuously for at least 3 months. Please note, the ESA establishes only minimum employment standards. You may also have rights under the common law or other legislation. To find out if you might be entitled to termination notice or pay, try our termination tool, available at ontario.ca/ESA tools.
Hey, Chris.
Hey.
I heard you were going to ask the boss to start paying you overtime pay.
Yeah.
I wouldn't do that if I were you.
Why not?
The last guy who asked about getting his overtime pay was fired.
Really?
Yeah.
Oh, thanks.
No problem. It is illegal for your employer to penalize you for exercising your rights under the Employment Standards Act or for asking about them. That means your employer cannot intimidate you, fire you, suspend you, punish you, or threaten any of these actions for exercising your rights or asking about them. If your employer does, it's called a reprisal, and your employer can be ordered by an employment standards officer to compensate you for any loss incurred because of a reprisal, reinstate you to your job, or both compensate and reinstate you.
Hi, Sue.
Hi.
So my last day is on Friday. I wonder when I'm supposed to get my last paycheck.
If you have a question about the ESA or need information on how to file a claim, you can contact the Employment Standards Information Center at 1-800-531-5551. Information Center staff can help you understand your rights and answer your questions in English, French, and many other languages. When you call, you don't have to provide your name or the name of your employer. And remember, your employer cannot punish you for talking to the Ministry of Labor. If you believe that you have not received your entitlements under the ESA, you can file a claim. A claim can be filed with the ministry in a number of different ways. To access the Employment Standards Claim Form, visit ontario.ca/ESA forms. Unionized employees should talk to their union representative for help with their issue. There are other ESA rights and special rules that I haven't touched on, including severance pay and rules for assignment employees of temporary help agencies. For more information on all your rights, please visit our website, ontario.ca/employment standards, or call our information center, 1-800-531-5551. Information is available in English, French, and many other languages.
All right, so that's the basics of the Employment Standards Act. So we don't need to read it through in this activity. You'll see that it highlights all the things the Employment Standards Act says around general minimum wage, what the minimum wage is. Now, obviously, that has actually changed. This document is old, so you will get your most recent information from let me just pull it up from the Employment Standards Act website. I'm just going to pull it up here. I sent it to myself. You heard those dings. So we go to the Ministry of Labor, and that will give us, oh, that's not the right one. Sorry about that. Let me pull it up here. It's called the Employment Standards Act Ontario. There we go. Okay, the Employment Standards Act. Oh, I went to the wrong spot. We want to go to the Labor Government. There we go. So in there, you can actually find your guide to the Employment Standards Act. You can also find that employment standards poster. So if you haven't seen this employment standards poster in your workplace, it should definitely be there. And I'm going to pop it in Google Classroom for you. Might pay if I'm in the right. I'm going to pop that link right into Google Classroom so you have access to it because you're going to need it to do our next assignment today. Let me just get in here. Let's pop that link in there for you. So you don't even need to go searching for stuff. It will be all in Google Classroom because you're going to need to go and do a scavenger hunt and find out the Employment Standards Act. So you can get all the information you need in here. Here's your guide to the Employment Standards Act. So most of the recent information will show here, and you can see that it's very easy to navigate. You can actually click on the links, minimum wage. Let's see what minimum wage is now in Ontario. If we go back to that co-op document, what did it say? It said it was $10.25 an hour, and that's when this document was created. Let's see if it's changed any. All right, here we go. General minimum wage starting October 2020 to September 2021 is $14.25 an hour. So that document was pretty old that we were looking at. Liquor servers make slightly less because they also it's expected that they would get tips. Student minimum wage is slightly different. And then there's obviously hunting and fishing guides, home workers, wilderness guides. There's different rates for different positions. So there are some exceptions. Okay. So let's, I do want to spend a minute looking at that video because there, in the employment standards video, it was outlined that there are some certain things that is actually illegal for an employer to deduct from your paycheck. And I don't think we ever take the time to really learn about those. So let's watch this 2-minute video and you're going to find out what are illegal deductions from your wages. Maybe, you know, you're involved. Maybe this is a thing that's, you know, relevant to you, but let's take 2 minutes to watch it.
In Ontario, employers cannot make deductions from an employee's wages, except in specific circumstances. For instance, say an item in the workplace is accidentally damaged by an employee. The employer cannot deduct the cost from the employee's wages. It's the law. The same rule applies for shoplifting. Staff members are not responsible for merchandise stolen by a customer, so their wages can't be used to pay for the loss. What about dine and dash? When a restaurant customer leaves without paying for a meal, the employer can't deduct the cost of the meal from the employee's wages. Nor should they run out after that customer. It could be dangerous. Same goes for gasoline theft. If a customer leaves without paying, the employer is not allowed to take the stolen amount from the employee's wages. And again, for safety reasons, it's never recommended to chase the thief. And what about when the cash count is short? It happens sometimes. If someone other than the employee had access to the cash register during the shift, the boss cannot deduct the missing amount from the employee's wages. Then there's the issue of faulty workmanship. Even when companies have to reimburse customers for a job poorly done, they cannot deduct the loss from their employees' wages, even if the employee has agreed to the deduction. So remember, except in specific circumstances, employers cannot make deductions from an employee's wages. For more information about your...
All right, so just remember that. If in doubt, you can always reach out to this number, 1-800-531-5551, and they'll give you more information over the phone. All right, so we went through all of those things: meals, coffee break, overtime, holidays, termination pay, vacation pay, union dues, medical leave. We haven't gone over filing a claim, but basically what you're going to do is you are going to fill in Google Classroom. You'll see I've given you an assignment of a scavenger hunt. And if you actually go to the scavenger hunt, I will go ahead and post it for you because I actually didn't post it. Okay, we're going to go to knowledge and understanding, and we'll make this due on Sunday. Okay, so let's go take a look at this scavenger hunt together. Give it a second to assign to you. And this is your final task for employment standards. And then tomorrow when we talk about human rights, then we'll do an activity to follow that as well. So the scavenger hunt looks like this. And all the links in the scavenger hunt are live, so it will help you find where you need to go. Oh, that's not the right scavenger hunt. Hang on. All right, so this, I just adjusted it and I put the correct scavenger hunt in there for you. So here it is here. I'm just going to make sure it's in the right place. Employment Standards Act scavenger hunt. And it looks like this, where you're able to go to those live links and find the information you need. What kind of workers are not covered by the Employment Standards Act? And if you click on this link, and I'll give you a tip, if you right click and open it in a new tab, right click, open in a new tab, you can leave the scavenger hunt open on the left and find the information on the right. So what kind of workers are not covered by the Employment Standards Act? So let's look. So, whoops. Where would we go to find that? Equal pay. So you're just going to take a look. Here we go with ESA exemptions. While most employees and employers are covered by the Employment Standards Act, there are some types of occupations to which ESA does not apply. They are covered by the ESA generally, but exempt for certain parts of it. So we're going to go to the special rule tool. Okay, and here we go. Whoops, let's get rid of this. Industries and jobs not covered under the Employment Standards Act. Okay, so secondary school students and co-op are not covered unless you're in a paid position. People participating in community or Ontario Works, police officers are not, young offenders as a court order, airlines, banks, post office. So what you're going to do is you're going to find what kind of workers are not covered by the Employment Standards Act, and you're going to fill it in here. Okay, then you're going to go and answer, what is the general hourly minimum wage? What I'm going to do is fix that link for you. There we go. Let's make sure I'm going to make it easier for you and put the correct link in here. There we go. Oops. Doesn't like me today. There we go. Okay, got the correct link. So you're just going to use this document and you're going to go and find all the information and fill it in around the Employment Standards Act. And by the time you do the scavenger hunt, you should be an absolute expert on all things Employment Standards Act, okay? Another thing to consider is, jobs that go between provinces are also not covered under the Employment Standards Act. Like it said, some things are still covered, but it's not 100% coverage. So another thing, if you are a federal employee, which does apply to a lot of the people who are living and working on reserve, if you go to the federal employment laws and standards, that's where you'll find the labor standards for the federal, if you're working for a federal organization. And the difference between provincial and federal is provincial is Ontario, or it's by province. So the Ontario Employment Standards Act is provincial, and federal is for all of Canada. Okay? So just take a minute to check that out. And we are going to take a quick look at a video around the federal labor standards. Okay, so we're going to take a quick look at Canadian Labor Code and see if there's a difference between the provincial versus federal labor laws. And I'm going to post a question in Google Classroom if there are any differences and why or why not. So let's take 2 minutes and watch this video now.
Most people know that there are laws that govern their workplace. What's a little less known is that not all employees and employers are subject to the same employment standards laws. I'm Paula Krauss. I'm a lawyer at Kent Employment Law, and I'm going to talk a little bit about the differences between provincial and federal laws when it comes to the workplace. So I'm really going to focus today on the Employment Standards Act in BC versus the Canada Labour Code, which is a federal or Canadian piece of legislation. So both govern workplaces. They govern what rights and obligations employees and employers have in the workplace. So the Employment Standards Act, it applies to provincially regulated employees, and the Canada Labour Code applies to federally regulated employees. It's easier to sort of define what federally regulated is, and then everything else is provincially regulated. So federal employees and federal employers are those working in industries like railway, marine transportation, airlines, industries that cross borders, cross provincial borders. And then there are banks, First Nations bands, and other First Nations organizations. Those are all federally regulated, and so they fall under the Canada Labour Code. It's important to know as an employer or employee which one you fall under, because the entitlements are, the benefits and the entitlements for employees are different under both. Both have slightly different notice of termination and termination pay provisions. Both have different severance provisions. One actually doesn't. The Employment Standards Act doesn't. And they both have different entitlements to leaves, sick leave, parental leave, mat leave, things like that. And one big characteristic of the Canada Labour Code is its unjust dismissal provisions, which protect employees against arbitrary dismissal. So if you are an employee or an employer and you need or want to know more about your benefits or obligations under your employment standards laws and want to know which one applies to you, contact us at Kent Employment Law and we can help you through that.